evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to see you all here despite the heat advisory, which they told us all to stay home tonight, but fortunately we are not all doing that. Thank you for joining us on the video audience. I'm Barbara Peters. I'm the owner of the Poison Pen, and it's my real privilege tonight to do another event with Steve Berry. And this is a standalone book called The Omega Factor, which we will, or rather, Steve and Diana will be discussing with an occasional interpolation from me. It's really a fun book, and you'll notice that your copy comes with an insert that the publisher has created. It's artwork because the centerpiece of this book is called the Ghent Altarpiece, which Steve will be telling you about. And our host tonight is Diana Gabaldon, who, in between jaunts to New York, Glasgow, California, we catch her when we can. Fortunately, was in town tonight and is a longtime friend of Steve's, and so she read my advanced reading copy on a plane, and here she is, ready to talk to Steve. So there you are.
Here's the hero of the hour.
It's quite an honor to have. If you had told me 20 years ago that I'd be sitting here getting interviewed, I'd say you're crazy. Yeah.
Well, at that point, you wouldn't.
Yeah. Well,
thank you. Well, it is all Steve's fault that I can now add thriller to the list of unlikely categories that my books fit in.
but you do write a thriller. You really do.
It's like, when this Thriller Master thing came up, my husband said to me, "You don't even write thrillers. Why are they calling it a Thriller Master?" And I said, "Well, it's not like I don't write thrillers."
Well, I get asked all the time, what's the difference between a mystery and a thriller?
Exactly.
It's a simple answer.
What's that?
A mystery is about what happened. A thriller is about what's going to happen.
Oh, well,
and that's what you write. And that's what you write. So they're not better than either. They're just different. And a mystery is always about what happened. And you go around to solve it. A thriller is about what is going to happen. It has not happened. It hasn't occurred. And then you definitely write that. And absolutely you write that. And so that's why I've said you've always been a thriller. In fact, I was the one that recommended you to be Thriller Master. Because I was with ITW, and I'm the one that said she needs to be Thriller Master. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate the thought.
Absolutely, yes. So your books, certainly they're historical thrillers. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a new combination.
Absolutely. In that regard, but.
I thought it might be a good idea to show the book.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, it's always
Is that not a beautiful cover? Yeah.
And
and a very handsome picture too on the back. Yeah.
And I can explain that artwork for you. In the novel deals with the Ghent Altarpiece, which is the most stolen, violated, and destroyed work of art in all of history. 13 times since the 14th century, something's happened to it. Why? Why this piece? Why does everyone go out? The latest one happened in 1934 when one of the panels was stolen, and it's gone. It has never been found. Hitler stole the altarpiece in World War II, and if you watch the movie The Monuments Men, that's what it's about, is finding it. Now, they kind of have a mini altarpiece. It's kind of small. The real one's about 30 feet long. But it wasn't the first work of oil painting ever done, but it was the first work to maximize oil painting. And John Van Eyck, who painted it, was a miniaturist. He could paint very small. And that's what this is, this card. On the right side of this card is a house. You see that building. If you go to the center panel of the altarpiece and you zoom in one particular area, you will find this little miniature house. Now, you can't find that. That's ultra high resolution you're looking at. There's a website called Closer to Van Eyck that has the entire altarpiece on it in high resolution, and you can zoom down. So I found that house, and I used it in the novel. Here's the thing. During the restoration of the altarpiece that occurred over the last 10 years, and particularly over the last 2 years with this panel, when I went to find it, it was gone.
Ooh.
They painted over it. Ooh. Yeah, it's gone. This is what the altarpiece looks like right now.
Wow.
Today. This is what it looked like about 3 years ago. And they painted over that house, which is bizarre to me. Why did you get rid of it? Where did it go? Was it an overpaint from years ago, or I don't know. There's no explanation, but it's just gone. That was really cool because this house figures into the novel a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. My stuff is about something from the past, something forgotten, something real that still has relevance today. So this is a modern day thriller that deals with the Ghent altarpiece. And this house I just thought was perfect. And so it's the monastery, it's the convent at the end of the novel that I adapted for it. And then we just stumbled onto about a friend of ours was at our house and she was saying, I want to see this house. So I went on to Closer to Van Eyck and I zeroed in and it wasn't there. It was gone.
Wow.
And luckily they keep the old picture and the new picture. So you can look at it before. And I went and looked at the two and sure enough, you can see it's just green and trees now. So who knows what happened?
Bizarre, yeah.
And why was that panel stolen in 1934? Never seen again. Never seen again. Calls The Just Judges, and it figures into the novel very much so. Yeah.
You can Google the altarpiece if you really want to see the entire thing. And there's the center panel that has a lamp, which has all kinds of religious significance and so forth. But, you know, I recommend that you go and look at it on Google because it'll make it a lot clearer.
The writer's note in the back references that website I just told you, Closer to Van Eyck. The people at the cathedral created that website and gave you the ultra high vision so you can really zoom in. The painting is full of miniature words and symbols and stuff. It's just all over the thing. No one really has any idea what any of it means. They really don't. And which is perfect for me because I can make it up however I want to. Which is exactly what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, well, now everybody asks me this, so I want to ask you, do you do your research first before you write, or do you do it concurrently?
I'd love to hear your answer to that, and just when I'm done. I do, I have to overlap. You have a luxury I don't have.
Time.
You have time. I have to do a book a year. So, you know, because that's how I make my living. And
I'm impressed that you do.
I have to do it, but I have to time those. And so when I'm writing the novel I'm working on, about 6 months from the end of that novel, I start researching the next one. So I'm actually writing this one and researching the next one, so that when I finish this one, I can start the next one immediately. Now, it's not all the research, but it's the preliminary. And then I do 12 months more after that as I'm writing the novel. It takes me a year to write it. So it's an 18-month process that overlaps. So there's always 3 in my brain at all times. I'm writing this one, plotting and researching this one, and conceptualizing the next one. So I can stay on that one a year schedule. Now, would I love to do one every 2 years? That'd be great, because I wouldn't have to have 3 in my brain at all times. So that's how I do it. I guess in your case, you just go along, right?
Well, it's basically what you do. It's just that it all ends up between 2 covers rather than 6. No. Essentially, it's sort of a feedback loop. I research at the same time that I'm writing. Then I will be writing something and I will think, well, now I have trees in here, but I don't know what kind of trees grow in the place where I am. All right, I have 3 books on that shelf that will tell me what kind of trees those are. Do I want to stop and look those up right now? No, I don't. So I put square brackets, tree, and then I will know when I pass through that bit again, and I have time to go and look up the tree and find out what it was.
I do something similar.
Something like that. You bookmark things.
There's no point in stopping the flow. Just keep going.
Right.
Just keep going on it.
Yeah.
My niche is, and yours is too, to a lot of degree. Your history, you keep it as accurately to the history as you can. I keep the same thing. I try to keep it as close to reality as I possibly can. I have to trip it up about 10%. And and I put a writer's note in the back that tells you where I tripped it up, so that you know.
Yeah, I do that too. If you're going to mess with history, you ought to admit it.
Yeah, you should. Right. Yeah, I agree.
Leave breadcrumbs for your readers and so forth. That's true. Yeah, but anyway, other things like, I know that I'm coming up on this particular battle. I know it happened here and it happened when. I don't know anything else about it. Okay, there are a lot of good resources for finding out about battles. One of my favorites is the Osprey books Men-at-Arms series, which takes a lot of battles from, very ancient times through World War II and probably Vietnam for all I know. But they will actually walk you through the entire battle, the order of battle. They'll tell you who was there, everybody that was there, and the names of all the commanders. And then they'll tell you exactly what happened, beat by beat through the whole thing. And it's they are about the size and shape of a coloring book, but very, very dense in terms of maps and things like that. So this is a good background. So if I'm using a battle that's covered by them, I know I'm in good shape because I will know exactly what happened at that battle, and then I can choose to use which part and whatever works. Because you're not going to fit a whole battle into a novel. This is something that Steve does very well, is to concentrate everything into the viewpoint of his main character, which makes you feel like you are actually living along with his main character. In this case, you have a brand new main character.
This is those of you, how many read me? I'm just curious. Just ask a question. I actually don't mind that because I like new readers. I actually like to see if I can bring new readers in. I don't mind that at all. But that I do Cotton Malone, and so he's my guy. But he talked to me about a year ago, and he said he wanted a year off. He said, "You've been working me to death for 16 years now, and I need a little bit of a break." But what happened was I moved to a new publisher. So I moved from Macmillan to Grand Central, and they wanted a standalone to start things off. And unfortunately, I had already written the Cotton Malone book, it was already done, and completely finished, ready to go. And they said, no, we'll do that in 23. We need a 22 book now, which would have been the 22 book. So we created it, Elizabeth and I, it's my wife, Elizabeth here, we had to create the thing. And so we built a new house. And we built a hot tub, and I've never had a hot tub before. I've never owned one before, and we loved it because it's like, this is amazing. You get in this thing. So we got in there one afternoon for about 3 hours and plotted this book. We keep it about 90, so it's not so bad. No, but we basically plotted what we had to do because they needed that book quickly, and it takes me, as you heard, 18 months to do it. I had to do this one about 11. But luckily, he was in my head. He'd been in my head for years. It's very similar to Cotton Malone. It's action, history, secrets, conspiracies, exactly what you want. Just a new character and a new guy with new motivations and new thought processes. And that's where I needed some help, and that's where she came in. And Elizabeth's very good at that kind of thing. So we gave him a family. Cotton doesn't really have a family. So this one has a family. He's got brothers and sisters. He's got parents. He has a love interest that is involved in this novel very strongly. And so he's a younger version of Cotton with different motivations, and he works for UNESCO in a division I created called CLIO, which is the Muse of History, Cultural Liaison Investigative Office. And so it's just something that was in my head. Luckily, I was able to put it together and make it work. If people like him, we'll try him again one day, but Cotton will be back next year and the year after. So he's not gone, don't worry. I know you get asked all the time, when are you going to end it? Never. Why?
Well, what I tell them is I'm 70 years old. I don't know how much longer I'm going to last. But you'll probably get a book 10, beyond that I can't say.
I'll go as far as they'll let me go. As I'm going to go, because Cotton does me well, and your guys do you well, and so you want to keep going.
Well, why not? Yeah, well, now for people who always say, where do you get your ideas? Now we know. You need a hot tub and an obliging spouse. Yeah.
We did. We sat out there that one afternoon and just, and then when we were done, we couldn't write down. So we'd write down.
Yeah.
And I said, you got to go in there right now. We got to type stuff. We got to type stuff, because I'll forget it. She's got a much better memory than I do. So we were able to get it all down. And then we got the book. We got it out in 11 months, which is good. So I said the Cotton book I had written will be out February 21 of next year, and I'll be back here for that one.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it should be. Yeah. Don't give her ideas. She gets thanked and everything, and she gets the check. Yeah. So she gets that part of it. So it's well.
Good. So I had a moment of realization today. I did an Instagram, a little chat to promote the event tonight, and I realized that it's a religious conspiracy thriller in part. So it's like, one of the ways that you try to interest readers in books is to hook it to an author that they may already know. So Dan Brown, right? Okay. But then I realized that the nun in this book is an art restorer. And so I don't know why it took me so long to go, Daniel Silva.
Daniel Silva, Gabriel Allen.
You know, it's really interesting that, so in a way, while he is like Cotton, in other ways,
Yeah, that's what I
he's
said.
a sound guy.
The trick to writing a series, as Diana well knows, is every book and everything you do, and this is not in the series, but I'm trying to attract your readers to it, is you write the same but different. That's a tall order. Same but different. Same, action, history, secrets, conspiracy. Different characters, different motivations, different things. So that's the trick. You don't want to write different. That'll get you in trouble. And same will get you in trouble just as well. Has to be the same but different, and that's the trick to it. So I'm hoping my readers will enjoy Nick. He's a nice little respite from Cotton, and who knows, they might meet one day. They actually exist in the same world. They do, yes.
Yeah, unlike Jamie Fraser, but we managed that one.
We did.
Actually, that was so brilliant. Why don't you talk about that for a minute?
That was his idea. Apparently his idea.
It was it was the book Face Off, and was it Face Off or Matchup? Matchup was my creation that we created at ITW, and we came up with the Face Off you took your main characters and the two writers did, and they went against each other. Matchup was male female, and
writers,
so
that is.
so we said it together with male female, and I asked Diana if she would do it, and she said yes, and we came up with this idea when Jamie is there in prison, in that long void. We've got that 20-year void there, so we're not interrupting your world or interrupting anything in there at all. And she was very generous. She wrote the first draft, and she wrote it in Cotton's, pretty much all Cotton's brain. It was just all Cotton, which I thought was very generous to do it. And then I took it and changed it a little bit, and I think I went to first person, didn't I?
I think you did.
Yeah, you were third person.
Yeah.
And then I wrote it first person past.
That's right.
And then I read it, and I went, nah, it's not going to work. It's got to be first person present. So it was first person present tense, and Cotton and Jamie interact, and Cotton's not sure if he dreamed it or whatever, but then there's a little twist at the end,
a little edge here,
and that was her idea. She came up with the little twist at the end where it wasn't a dream; it actually did happen. So Cotton has the ability to go back in the stones. He actually.
Should you ever want to let him do that?
Yeah. He had that ability to do it, and but it was fun. It was a fun little. He got to meet Jamie and interact and solve a little mystery at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was a fun story in Matchup. I enjoyed it.
It was. Yes, he also meets Galis Duncan.
Yes. Yes.
Did you need further inducement?
Yes. And that book's available as a single too, I believe, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's out in a single, so you can actually download that as a single.
Yeah, and there's an audio version of it as well.
Yeah.
Both as a single and as the whole book.
Yeah, and all of the proceeds from that book goes to ITW. We donate the story. It was donated. All the writers of those anthologies donated their stories, and that's how ITW paid for itself, is through those publications.
Do you want to mention what ITW stands for?
ITW, International Thriller Writers. It's the Guild of Thriller Writers. I was a founding member, and it's about 6,000 now, I think, writers from around the world. So it's like their guild. They just had Thriller Fest. Every year they honor a writer as their thriller master. This year, there's Diana. Diana was our thriller master, and it's a great honor to be a thriller master because you have to achieve a certain status. You have to be around a long time. We set a 20-year rule. You had to at least be published 20 years.
31. Yeah.
And you had to have some significant contribution to the genre. And so we, it's Clive Cussler Clive was our first. Was our first, and we've had a whole array of great thriller masters. So and the way the organization pays for itself is through its publications. I was vice president of publications for 12, 15 years, so I oversaw almost all the publications.
And the origin story of ITW was at the Arizona Biltmore at a Poison Pen conference when I dared the people there who were unhappy with other organizations, and they were all complaining in the bar, and I'd had enough. I'd also had a lot to drink. And I said to them, I'll edit my adjective, why don't you start your own organization.
And they did.
And it was
They
like
did.
electric. And so it was Lee Child and Kathy Reichs and David Morrell and Gail Lynns, Vince Flynn. Trying to think,
There's a
and
lot of
Clive,
them.
who was in fact a luncheon speaker, and they took me up on the
Yeah,
dare.
Gail and David really took it and went
Yeah,
with it.
yeah,
They're actually recognized as the founders of
Yeah.
ITW. And now we started, when I was president, we had about, 300-400 members.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
now,
really
now we've
great.
got 6,000, from around the world, which is really amazing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, the banquet I was just at, they had all the awards and stuff, but one of the awards was given to this very lovely, as in tall, willowy, model-esque, etc., Sri Lankan woman who had written, I think the best young adult thriller, but
Was that Amanda?
I think so. Yeah.
Amanda Jayatisa, her name
Yes,
is.
that's
Yeah.
right.
She flew in. She
Yeah,
flew
she
in.
did,
She
yeah.
flew all the way there
Patrick,
for that.
Patrick
Amazing.
hiding back here in the studio lost his heart to Amanda when we did, didn't you, Patrick? We did. Remember Amanda? Amanda Jayatisa, when we did the Zoom event, remember?
Yes.
You lost your heart to Amanda. She was great, and in fact, we're doing something with her fairly soon, I
Oh,
think.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll get to see her.
She won a thriller the other night.
She did.
Yeah,
she did.
Yeah.
Did she come to New York?
She did.
Excellent.
did.
All the way from Indonesia. Boy,
Yes.
that is.
She did.
Uh-huh.
Other questions you have? Yes, sir.
Steve, when you were writing your Cotton Malone story, and you're looking at his later adventures and challenges, when you're writing, do you say, well, he does this and she says this? Do you ever need to go back and research your previous stories to make sure that
I do.
mythology is woven
I'll admit, and I was told long ago, and you probably do this, to keep a little list of all those things, that little characteristics and all those little things. I did not,
Yeah,
so
no,
I
I
have to go. I have to go back and literally, I have to thumb through the books and hunt them down. I know this is going to sound terrible, but you actually forget the books. I mean, I really do. People will ask me about a book from 10 years ago and say something. I don't remember it even being, because when you're done with the book, you purge it from your brain because you got to get to the next thing. You can't keep all that stuff in your brain. It's not possible. And I forget, and I do forget a lot of little tidbits, little things. The other day I was writing a scene with Luke Daniels about his father, and I said something about he was a very religious man, and I realized later I was wrong. I had said something completely different in another book. See, and readers will catch that.
Yeah.
They'll catch that in 2 seconds. So, but I was warned to write all that stuff down.
Oh,
I never did. Did you?
Yeah, no, I never did either.
Yeah. So we just, hopefully we remember and we get it right. I try to be vague as I can. I do.
Yes, that's
as
exactly
vague
how
as
you do it.
possible. Sometimes you can't. You have to be right on it. But I try not to get myself into that situation where
you don't wanna
I would
state.
contradict
Absolutely.
itself. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, do you have online groups that you talk about your writing, or fan groups who interact with you?
I'm not that big. I mean,
Okay.
that's up in your league up there in the stratosphere. I don't really have. There's thriller readers are a little different.
Yeah.
They don't really
They don't
do
dig
that.
into the minutiae.
But they will send you emails.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
good. That's
They'll do that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh no, they'll send you emails and tell you where you messed up and what you got wrong.
Yeah.
And it kills me. You'll get an email, the guy says, I was reading your book on page 380. You had the wrong word here. And you're obviously stupid and I'm never going to read you again as long as you live. And you want to write back and say, you do realize there was like 120,000 words in that book? And you found one? I got the other 119,999 right, But they get really, they like to tell you how dumb you are, yeah. But we do make mistakes. Yes.
Oh, we
Yes,
do.
ma'am.
I'm relatively new to your email list, which I got my email today.
All right.
But I've been on Douglas Preston and Lincoln Childs for quite a while, and they occasionally will release a short story just via email. Do you ever do that?
I have not done that in a while. I've done some novellas with MJ Rose, and we did some novellas with one of my characters, Cassiopeia Witt. We did 4 of those. And I did short stories for ITW, but I haven't done them on my own. I remember telling Diana, I said, Diana, I want to do a short story, but I'm short story challenged. I'm not good at writing them. They're very hard to write.
Yes, they are.
People think they're easy. They're not. They're really hard.
Rick Johnson always releases
Yeah.
Christmas.
Yeah.
via email.
Well, more power to him.
It's hard. It's hard. And between the two of us, we banged it out and got it done. But it's very difficult. And I've done a few with the ITW anthology, but I was lucky. Like Jim Rollins and I did one. Jim is not short story challenge, so he can actually. He's good at putting them together. I'm good at rewriting them, but creating them. That plot is tough to get in that little space, you know, and it's not. Shorter is always better, but it's harder. It's harder. But I'm not to say I wouldn't do it. You know, it is a challenge. It's challenging, so you never know. I might try it again one day. Yeah.
So Steve, let's talk about location, because one of the fun things about reading Steve's books is all the great places that you get to go. I remember when you wrote the one in China, that how much fun it was. I'd actually been in Xi'an and been to see, you know, the terracotta warriors and the whole bit. It's such an interesting sight. And by the way, they still have never opened the emperor's tomb, and they have found. The rumor is that he's floating on a sea of mercury, and that's why, you know, he's there unchallenged. And they've been doing some testing on Nat Geo thing was on the other day, and said they've actually found significant mercury vapor and so forth around this. It's like a giant hill.
But they could go in that tomb if they wanted to.
Right, but Steve thought, you know, there's a tomb, I can go in there.
And I did. I put him in there.
Exactly. But, you know, how do you decide what, I mean, obviously in this one, if you're going to write about the Ghent altarpiece, you had to go to Belgium,
I
right?
saw it.
But the other books, you have choices. Well, how do you decide, you know, where you want to go?
Well,
Your first book, The Amber Room, which was not a Cotton Malone.
No, it was a standalone. But I saw the Amber. I went there and saw it.
You didn't see the real Amber.
No, I saw the reproduction that they were working on. In 1995, when I went, they were just working on it, and it was in. And I spent an afternoon. I had written the novel in '92. Now it didn't sell till 2003. I don't know if you know my story, but I didn't write my first word. I was 35. From the day I wrote my first word to the day I sold my first word was 12 years. I wrote 8 novels during that period. 5 went to New York houses. They're rejected 85 times. I made it on the 86th time, 12 years after I started. And The Amber Room was my 4th manuscript, but it was the first published manuscript. And I had written the novel. I went over there, and the chief restorer was very nice. He sat down with me, and I had an interpreter. And they told him about the story, and he looks at me and he goes, "Nat, you have all wrong." And he did. He was right. He said, "No, see, I envisioned the panels would be intact and all together." He said, "No, like jigsaw puzzle. Be on ground like jigsaw puzzle. That's how you put together, but no picture. Jigsaw puzzle, but no picture. That's how you put it. All that amber would have fallen off those panels, and I had it completely wrong, all completely wrong." But we went back about 2009. We went back and we saw the restored room, the actual restored room, which is incredible. It's the greatest thing man has ever done with amber. But that intrigued me. You know, the Amber Room in the 1990s, no one knew what it was. Nobody even knew what it was. So I try to look for things and places that you've never been, but you might want to go. But they also need to have secrets and mystery associated with them that's real. I can't make them up. It'd be easier to make them up. It'll be much more fun, but like you have to work within the confines of the American Revolution and all the things that are going on. You can alter it a little bit, but you can't alter it significantly, you know, and I have that same problem. I can alter it just a tad, but I got to stick with it. And so I try to find, here, you know, it was Belgium and the Ghent altarpiece, and then going into southern France to the Pyrenees. If you've never been, it's incredible. And the monastery that I used is real. It's mentioned in the back of the book. It's St. Martin's down in the Pyrenees. It's an incredible trek up there. Sister Claire, who's in the novel, is real. She's there, and she took me around and showed me. We had a little bit of a problem because Sister Claire, you can't talk in the convent, see? And I had to ask questions. And so I would ask a question. She'd go, "Shh." She'd go, "Shh. No. And so we had to go outside for her to, you know, to explain it. But she was very nice and she explained everything to me. And I made her a central character of the novel. And so I look for places. The places in my novels are characters. They're a character. Yours are too. I mean, you setting that whole scenario is all part of it, which is amazing to me. I've told you this before. none of that is filmed in North Carolina. But
Yeah, you're right.
But it looks just like North Carolina. It looks just like Western North
They
Carolina.
take some pains.
Oh yeah, but I mean the house, everything. It's just like, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
That house is located in Scotland, or
Yeah.
Scotland.
Yeah, it's on the lot of the set in Cumbernauld.
So they made it. They just that's all
built it, yeah.
created, just created.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the house where they live now, the farmhouse on the ridge.
The original cabin, the big house, etc.
So it's basically a set.
Oh, it's a huge set.
It's a
Yeah.
set.
Yeah, it had 2 sound stages the first time I went during the first season of filming. When I went back during the second one, because I wrote a script that time, they had 4, and now I think they have 16 different
Wow.
sound stages. So they can build, a different room or whatever there and not have to knock it down immediately to do something else. But yeah, the
amazing.
big house is standing out at the back edge of the lot.
It's amazing.
But
Amazing.
isn't
Yes, ma'am.
it true, Dee, that after Culloden, that many of the Scots who became immigrants actually came to the Carolinas
They
because
did.
it was like Scotland,
That's right.
which is one reason there's moonshine and
Mhm.
quilting
Exactly
and
right.
weaving and ballads and all
Mhm,
those
mhm.
things that we think of as Appalachian culture.
Yeah,
Really
these are the
is
Scottish
mostly
culture.
Scottish, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You had a question, ma'am?
I was going to ask if Diana had ever used you as a reference for things North Carolina, but then you
No.
said you forgot.
No, I hadn't realized he was from North
No,
Carolina.
not from North Carolina, but I've been there a lot, and I set a novel there myself. But I've been up to Western North Carolina a whole bunch, and and we almost moved there. We came, it was between St. Augustine or living up around Asheville. That's how close we came. It's gorgeous, and it very much looks
Yeah,
like
it's
it
a lot
and
like
all.
Scotland, yeah.
Yeah, I have one of my novels. This is amazing. I can't remember which one it was, with the princess trees. No, I mean, isn't it amazing how you forget your books? It was so
Well,
long
it's been a
ago.
long time.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, there's a tree called the princess trees, and well, no, that I know it is Romanov prophecy. Yeah, Romanov prophecy with the Romanovs. I set the heirs in Western North Carolina because the princess trees are there, who are named after one of the Russian princesses, and they grow there in abundance. The princess trees do. Yeah, I like I said, I could live in Western North Carolina.
Oh yeah, me too.
Easily. No, yes, ma'am.
After 85 rejection, number 86 being published, what would you tell younger writers?
Well, I mean, obviously it sounds cliche, but it's true. You can't quit. There's an element of luck involved in all this, obviously, but you make your own luck by staying in the ball game. I would never have been published if I'd walked away. I stayed. I say all the time, it was like we were playing ball, and I'm on the field with my bat, my glove, and my ball, and I'm just standing there. And finally, after 12 years, everybody came back with their bat, ball, and gloves and said, "We're ready to play now. Are you ready to play?" Well, luckily, I was still standing there. And that's what I would say to them. You have to hang with it, particularly today. Today, you have to stay with it. Well, I'm not going to say, I'm not a Superman now. During that time, I quit probably 2 or 3 times. I said, this is kind of silly, and I'm wasting my time. I was a lawyer, so I was practicing law. I made a living. I was fine. But every writer I've ever met has a little voice in their head, and the little voice tells you to write. It doesn't tell you to write a bestseller and make a bunch of money and sell all that. It doesn't say that. It just says, I need you to sit down and write. If you will, I'll shut up. If you don't, I'm going to nag you. And every single writer I've ever met has that little voice in their head. You're born with it. You're born with the little voice. You're not born knowing how to write. You have to learn the craft of writing, but you are born with the voice. And that voice would always come back and say, okay, enough of the pity party. Let's get back to work and stay with it. And I did. I stayed with it till one day in May of 2002, Lady Luck said, today's your day. Today I'm going to give you that. It was a little weird, really. Yeah. It was a little anticlimactic in some respect because you'd gone through 12 years of all of that. And then I was in Copenhagen. And in those days, you didn't have cell phones and things. We had faxes. So I came back to the hotel room, and there was the fax sitting on they had brought it in and put it there, that the Amber Room had been, what I did, I'd convinced my agent to resubmit the Amber Room for a second time. It was rejected in 1995. And 7 years later, I said, let's try it again. This is a good story. It's a good story. And she said, okay. So she did it. And Mark Tavani at Random House bought it because he knew something I didn't know. They had a booklet there that they had bought from an unknown writer, basically a failed writer. His first 3 books were a disaster. But the 4th book was something new and different, a little fresh. They'd never seen it in a long time. It's called the Da Vinci Code. Now, they didn't realize at that time they had one of the largest selling fiction books of all time in their hands, but they realized they had something fresh. And they were looking for things to go with it. And Dan writes Action, History, Secret. I was a Dan Brown fan long before Da Vinci Code. I have all of his books bought when they came out in the 90s. So exactly what I did. What I wrote was what he wrote. And Da Vinci comes in March of '03. I came in September of '03. And Dan was very gracious. He gave me a wonderful blurb that said, "My kind of thriller," which was just lovely. And it worked great. So he's a very generous guy. And I say all the time, there would be no ITW if it hadn't been for Dan, because Dan brought that genre back to life. You kicked them in the tail a little bit to go, but they had to have a genre to work with, and the spy thriller had died.
That's really true, but what's really interesting about that story is that the first book, not the Da Vinci Code, but Angels and Demons, I still say is a far better book, and I stood on my head to convince that publisher, not Random House, that they had something remarkable, and I just couldn't get them interested.
Well, the genre was dead when that book was published.
Well, it was partly that, but you really need a person at a publishing house to love a book, and
it happened with Da Vinci. It did. It happened.
Well,
with that.
it did, but that's why he moved to Random House.
Jason Kaufman recognized it and brought it over there. And what happened was when the Berlin Wall fell in the 90s, the spy thriller died. If you were Le Carré or Ludlum or Cussler and those guys, you were fine. But if you're trying to break in, like I was trying to break in, they weren't. It was dead. By the mid-90s, it was gone. By 2000, it was dead and buried. Da Vinci brought it back not as a spy thriller, but as action, history, secrets, conspiracies. Guess what I was writing? I was in the right place at the right time 12 years after I started.
Right.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah,
and Steve was right here with the
with the Amber Room.
Like
sit right here, right here.
Other people. How many people were there?
About 5.
Yep. But you know what? That is true so many times. That's why I always encourage you to come and meet new authors. You never know. I had to fight. I can't even tell you what I went through to get Delia Owens here with Crawdads. The publisher didn't know what it had. I love this publisher, but they really didn't. And they didn't want to tour her, and she didn't want to tour. She's not a clubbable woman, let me put it that way. But we wanted to buy a whole lot of books because I really liked it. And eventually, I have a photo of her on my phone I just found. Eventually, I got her here, and there were like 2 people. And I modestly bought 100 books. I should have bought like 10,000.
Yeah.
But you don't always
Those
know
first
that.
editions
but
are worth some.
Readers really should try to pay attention to the first novelists that come here, because you'll never again have that chance, to be there and that first time around. It's just.
I wish I had that little stack of Amber Rooms that you had on that table that day.
Yeah, I have one.
I like that. I wish I had them.
We can negotiate.
Because I don't have any. Your first book, they give you like 25 or 30. You give them all away. You don't keep them. You give them to all your friends. You give them to everybody. I got 1 or 2. They're worth a little bit of money now because they're gone. There are none of them.
And in my library is a book called Cross Stitch. You all know Cross Stitch? Yep, because Diana brought it into the store to show it to me in February, I think it was, and said that she had written a novel, and this was the British edition, and it would be published here, but with a different title.
Different title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first hardcover edition of Outlander, was there a lot of them?
Actually, yes. Sort of by accident, in that Jackie Cantor fell in love with it, and actually there was a small bidding war for the book, and so it had aroused a certain amount of interest by the time it reached them, and they sat on it for 18 months trying to decide how to sell it because they couldn't describe
what was it? Right.
Yeah, I mean, labels. You needed to put a book on a shelf with a label back then, pre-Amazon, and. Finally, Jackie more or less offered to fall on her sword. She said, either you publish this book or I quit. This is the best book I've ever read. And so they sort of sighed and said, all right. And they had to think, what the heck to do with it. And they said, well, we're going to make it visible at least. So they gave me an initial print run of 25,000, which was very
That's
respectable
very big.
for,
That's very
for a
respectable.
first
Very
hardcover and so
respectable.
forth. And let's see, and it sold reasonably well. Let's see, that was when we had Walden Books and B. Dalton. B. Dalton bought 10,000 copies, so Walden Books bought 100 copies for the whole chain, which came out to about a third of a book per store. Well, as it turned out, the book buyer for Walden Books had not read the book. They just looked at it and said, eh. But as it was, then it kept popping up at the bottom of bestseller lists because of the B. Dalton sales and so forth. And finally, the Walden bookseller said, well, what is this anyway? She read it and went back and bought another 10,000. So, we're stable. But what actually did it was, I didn't want them to publish the book as a romance because it's not. And as I said to my agent, I said, there are things in these books that men see that women don't. And I don't want to lose the entire male half of my readership. I mean, it's not women's fiction, it's not men's fiction, but there's stuff that appeals specifically to either gender or sex or however you want to put it in these modern days. So he said, well, being a man, I understand this, but bear in mind that a bestseller in romance is 50,000 copies in paperback. Bestseller in fantasy is 50,000 in paperback. Bestseller in romance is 500,000. I said, you got a point, sell it as romance.
So it's romance.
Because bearing in mind the, word of mouth thing.
Very good point, actually.
Yeah, it makes much more sense to expose it to 500,000 people who will go out and spread your word of mouth.
Right.
And people who read it will realize eventually that it's not romance. It took me 8 years to get it out of the romance section at Barnes & Noble. I finally did, only by writing a rude letter to Steve Riggio, who was the CEO at the time. Anyway, word of mouth does work, and it spread and so forth. But what they did to start with, to kick it off in the romance community, was that they sent me to the Romance Readers of America convention, never been to, didn't belong to it, etc. And they had sent 1,200 copies of the book to that convention to be given away, in the treat bags and so forth. So I walk in and give the girl at the reception counter my name, and she said, as they do, how do you spell that? And she was sitting in front of this large stack of Outlanders. So I said, like that. And she turned around, looked. She looked at me and said, it's you! Because at that time, romances were not hardcovers. I mean, they weren't. They were all paperback originals. So to have this enormous, garish-looking, gaudy, let us say, book of a hardcover attracted everybody's attention. And it caused all kinds of controversy at the romance writers convention, a lot of them reading it on the spot, saying, this isn't a romance. And I said, yeah, you're right. But there you are anyway, you read it. So anyway, things happened and so forth. Anyway, the bottom line here is that the print run for Bees was 725,000.
Wow. And they went right back to press, I might add. So that was
yes, and we signed 30,000 of them right here. Well, actually in a warehouse for the purpose.
It's true, and the other benefit is because they're so big, it's actually better than joining a gym to work here. Because
no
each
kidding.
carton there's Terry back there flexing her muscles because she does that. I'm trying to remember, it was the book before Bees. Wasn't a carton weighed 32 pounds each? Wasn't that what we figured out?
Yeah, that was written.
This one, they only put 8 books in a box because they worked out that the boxes fell apart if they put the normal 12 in. So these only weighed 24, but if you've got literally hundreds of them and you're lifting them and moving them and all, it's actually a great workout. So we get to save on gym memberships and just sell Diana's books. It all works out extremely well. Right. And Steve, this is, what would you say? Is this the normal size for?
Mine's just a little baby.
Oh, hey.
Just a little baby.
No, it's not a
nice
baby.
solid.
Little baby. I like
the cover too.
I try to keep the I like about 100 to 110,000 words.
Which
and
is
yours
pretty
are
small for a
what?
thriller, really, isn't it?
480,000 about.
Yeah. So you're doing 4 books for me.
Well, yeah.
4 books. I did 130. That's the most I've ever done. 130. I'm trying now. As I said, you may say, well, writing shorter. No, it's actually harder. I'm trying to write the books now around 100,000 words, which is actually hard.
That is hard.
It's hard. It's actually harder to do. So I like to keep them right in that neighborhood, about 100 to 100. A good thriller that's a good range for it. Much over that, it gets, you better be really good, when you get up higher than that.
So you've touched on this, but what's the value of an author note? If you're writing historical fiction, you can't put in so much fiction, history, that it turns into nonfiction or bores the reader. How expansive do you think an author note could or should be to
It depends on
deal
what
with, you know, the parts you couldn't put in because the pace of the
I
book
learned to
was
do
slow?
it from Sharon K. Penman. She was my favorite, and you know she passed away last year,
yes,
but
she
she was my favorite. She was, I mean, Michener's my all-time favorite, but you know she was right there with him. I mean, right there, and her writer's note in the back would be 35, 40 pages long. You know, she would write very extensive, and she wanted you to know where everything came from and how it worked.
Yeah, well,
So
she
I
was a
learned.
historian.
It makes and she was good at it, and I learned from her. And I do mine, and I take a lot of time for that writer's note. I go through the page by page of the book. I want to make sure I explain to you. Like Diana said, I think it's up to us to make sure we tell you what's right, real, and what's not. Usually, you're going to think something's false, and you're going to find out it's real. That's what instead of the other way around. You know, because I look for those things. That's what I want to put in there. And you're right. Mixing information with action is the hardest challenge in our genre, because the people who read our genre want the information, but it's not a textbook. It's a novel, and my job is to entertain you. So it's that mix. Now, I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I am conscious of it to make sure that I mix it carefully, as carefully as I can. And the shorter you write, the harder that is, by the way, because you don't have a lot of time to put all that together. But in this book, you're going to learn a good bit about, again, altarpiece, but there's also a religious surprise. I don't want to tell you what it is because it's a little surprise that comes in about 3/4 of the way into the book that fascinated me, and I hope it'll fascinate you.
You know, I'm glad you brought up Sharon K. Penman. She was a dear friend, and I loved her book. She wrote a very few mysteries, but she wrote some very large historical novels.
She did.
But I remember sitting here talking to her at one event, and she pointed out that one of the tricks of writing really great historical mystery is to be specific. You would never say they sat under a tree. It would have to be they sat under a beech, or they sat under an oak, or, you know, everything had to be defined specifically, not generically, and that really brought the history or whatever it is. But you also had to be sure that wherever you were, that tree existed, which Diana's already talked about.
That square bracket tree,
And
Yeah, well, yeah, I've seen some of Diana's drafts, and believe me, they are full of brackets. You know? But you know, it makes sense not to lose the velocity of the writing when you can always go back and figure that part out.
She actually
later.
taught me that same rule. I have like 13 rules of writing that I work through. And one of the rules is an oak is better than a tree, and it came from her. An oak is better. That just means be specific. Don't, you know, when you can, be specific as you can. And so
right,
she
and
taught me
Dorothy
that.
Dunnett did that. Many of you read Dorothy Dunnett. She's sadly now deceased. Diana can tell you about Dorothy Dunnett because she was a marvelous writer. Did you ever meet her?
Yes, I did. I was lucky enough to meet her in Scotland when I had gone there for a brief book tour.
Yeah,
So
I had
she very
lunch with her
kindly
in
invited me to
Edinburgh
dinner,
once.
and we had a nice time.
What was,
But yeah,
what,
she's
I'm trying to
fascinating.
remember, what were the name of her two big series? Do you
The
recall?
Lymond Chronicles, and I'm not sure what she called the Niccolo books. They had a different overarching name, but she had two main characters who you know, occupied different cultural niches during the late Middle Ages, and it's fascinating stuff. You know, it's very. She said to an audience in my hearing, I set out to write the romantic hero to end all romantic heroes, and largely succeeded. But her books were not romance, save in the very classical sense. They are history, adventure, a lot of conflict. They're rather brutal in places, but entertainingly so. And she paid great attention to language and nuance and the very specific attributes of the culture. And she was great with dialogue.
Dunnett. You should look for her book.
Yeah, her Lymond Chronicles have been reprinted within the last year or so because her publisher sent me a whole nice
Oh, nice.
Wow.
match that. Yeah.
You had a question?
I haven't read many of your books yet, but do you have anything that would lend itself to be a spin-off, like Diane has with the Lord John series, or any of
Actually, we're going to do that next summer. I have a character in the Cotton Malone books. His name is Luke Daniels. He's a younger guy, and he's a little bit impetuous, and he gets himself into things, and he's going to have his own series starting next summer. Grant Blackwood is a thriller writer, who wrote with Cussler and Clancy and Jim Rollins, and he's working on the book with me. So we're doing that together, and he'll get 3 books. Yeah, he's going to have it. And I did some novellas with M.J. Rose for my other character, Cassiopeia Witt, who's basically modeled after her. It's basically her. Cassiopeia is her. So there's 4 novellas with Cassiopeia Witt that we spun up. She would if you gave her. I don't want to. Yeah, well, there's actual argument, but Cassiopeia is basically her, and I'm basically Cotton. I mean, I used our personalities, and there's sometimes there's actual fights we've had in the novel where the 2 are fighting each other. No one would know that but us, but it's actually in there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
To your point a while back about continuity and not necessarily remembering the book. In fact, I've not read all of your books. I've read quite a few of them. And I'm the kind of person that when I read it, I'm into it. When I'm done, I really forget it.
Yeah.
We would have a hard time having this conversation about it.
We write them and we do it. We do that. Yeah.
But I do appreciate something you do. Every book seems to stand on its own. You don't have to have read the one before to benefit from the reading of one, but you always will. If you have read the
there's a little something there.
There will be some reference
Little
to it
something.
that will trigger something. Oh, I remember that.
But it won't irritate you if you had not read the book before, because that drives me crazy when you're writing a series. Yeah, so in my case, you can actually skip around all the books however you want. If you've read them, you might recognize a little something, but if you've not read the others, that you won't even pay attention to it. That little tidbit will mean nothing to you whatsoever. And, yeah, I learned that from Lee Child when he does the Jack Reacher books. He taught me that in a lot of
Little
ways.
Easter eggy things.
But only if you've read it. If you haven't read it, you don't pay. It's kind of like I say all the time. If y'all were in here whispering each other, and we're not part of the whisper, it'd drive you crazy, right? Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, that's what happens when you make references in books, thinking the readers have read all these other books, and I don't want to do that. I want you to skip around and do whatever however you want.
So that leads to the question of whether authors should be part of their TV series. So if you watched the Lee Child, did any of you watch?
Yeah, he was there.
Did any of you recognize
I
Lee
saw
at the very end?
Yeah.
Yep. He's
And that little bump.
He's
That
walking
little
out
bump.
of the coffee shop. He's like the second to the last character you see.
Little bump.
Yep. And you know, it's fun.
And I saw you too.
I had a cameo in the
Diane
first
definitely done
first
it. Your
episode.
hair was amazing. They did
Wasn't
this.
it? Yeah.
It really was.
Well, it was a wig, you know.
Well, I know, but it looked, I'm so used to having long hair, and here it all was. You know, it was gorgeous. It was actually, I think, Colin Dexter that might really have made that. Well, Alfred Hitchcock for sure, but Colin Dexter appeared in every Morse.
Yeah.
You know, it was like you always could look for him, and it was really fun.
Well, Lee's been in all 3 now. He was in the 2 movies.
Yeah.
And he's been in the TV show.
Right.
Yeah, he was there. Yeah, I was waiting for him. I watched that whole thing.
Me
I was saying,
too, all the way to
I
the
keep
end.
waiting. He's got to come somewhere now. Come on. Yeah.
But it had to be the coffee shop.
It was
right?
very clever the way they
He's a
did
man
it.
who lives on coffee. I mean, literally lives
Yeah.
on coffee.
He drinks like 2 gallons a day. Yeah.
Andrew, his brother, drinks on average 30 cups a day.
Yeah.
And Lee is
That's
somewhere
Lee.
along
Lee.
that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know it. They both grew up in Birmingham, England, where I'm gathering that maybe it was just cold or something. I don't know why it was, but they acquired this amazing caffeine habit. Does anyone else have a question?
I saw a hand in the back.
Lady in the back there.
Well, see, that's the way I look at it. I don't really adhere to writer's block of what it is, to be honest with you. If you're talking about getting stuck, get stuck all the time.
Yeah.
That's going to happen 10 times a day, all the time. I mean, no one sits down and it just flows out beautiful prose perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Well, I sit on panels with folks. I have in the past, and they talk about that. They sit down in the morning, and they just flows out of their brain. It just comes down. I want to go, excuse me, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah,
that ain't never happened in a million years.
Are the books any good?
Yeah. If you're getting stuck, you got to figure out how to unstick yourself. For me, it just means walk away from it for a little while. Go do something else. Go do it. It'll come. It'll fix itself. Now, true writer's block is when the little voice in your head goes silent, and that means you're done. And I know writers that the little voice in their head has gone silent, and you're done. You can't write anymore. You're not stuck. You just can't do it anymore. And I know some folks who have reached that point in their life where that happens. So for me, that's how I look at writer's block. And from the standpoint of just getting stuck, just figure out how to unstick yourself. You know, for me, I may go hit some golf balls, or I might go do something around the house, or sometimes just go aggravate her. It works. Yeah, it works. And then
In the hot tub?
No, she won't let me. I go in there and I do it, and she'll look at me. She'll say, "You're stuck. Get out of here." She knows I'm stuck. You know. So it just, how do you get unstuck?
Well, I'm kind of the opposite. I don't stop, basically. When I started writing this, I still had 2 full-time jobs and 3 children under the age of 6. And so I worked a lot at night, and I had limited hours to work. So I would start with a grant proposal for my university job, which is the worst writing ever. I can only do it for, half a page, then I have to go do something else. But I couldn't get that. And then I would immediately reach for the first software assignment on my pile from Byte magazine, open that up, and start outlining that and filling in the blanks, because that's how you write software reviews. And that would stick, a little farther down the page. Everything I write sticks about 2/3 of the way down the page. It doesn't matter what it is. Anyway, when that happened, I'd check the grant proposal. If nothing was happening there, I would, at that point, start writing a nonfiction article for a journal or something. And that one stuck. I'd check back. If nothing else was happening, I would, at that point, start on a scene that I had going for the novel that I was working on.
You shift around enough.
Yeah, so I would just cycle back and forth. So I never left the keyboard. I had to keep writing stuff, or I needed to get paid, and the novel was kind of my treat for writing the other stuff. But that taught me, just to keep going. If what you're writing is not doing it for you, write something else. Just shift a little, something within the same work, the same story, the same novel, or something totally different. But as long as you're sitting there writing, it's true that your synapses are affected by your physicality. The act of typing will, in fact, make your brain continue to be focused on working, and it kind of makes your juices flow. Up to
And you
point.
still work in the middle of the night, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, yeah.
I've actually called her at 1 in the morning, and she answers.
Well, I've gotten emails from you like 3 o'clock in the morning my time. So, yeah. And so you work. I'm just the opposite. I work in the mornings. I'm a morning person. So,
No, I'm not.
Yeah, because I had a full-time job as a lawyer, so I had to go to the office, and I wrote from 6:30 to 9 before everything got going.
Right.
Tried to do my 1,000 words during that period of time.
Yeah.
So I became a morning person more so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my walk-in pace too. Is 1,000 words a day.
1,000 words is a good day. That's a good day. Yeah.
So there's one more thing you can do. Diana touched on it. Is that you can write something totally different. I don't know if any of you wrote or ever read Minette Walters, but you remember she had television. No, probably it's been a long time since you're none of you looking. What was the name of The Ice House? I think was her first book. Won all kinds of awards, and then she wrote a number of contemporary and kind of slightly gothic crime novels, and she was a huge success and all. And then she just disappeared. And time went on, and then one day her British publisher sent me an advanced reading copy of a new book by Minette Walters, and it's set in the bubonic plague era. And I wrote back and I said, "Is this some other Minette Walters?" And they said no, and I said, "So why?" And they said she had writer's block and she couldn't get over it, so she decided to write something totally different, historical fiction. And now I just got another advanced reading copy. This will be the 3rd one that she has written. And so that unlocked whatever the problem was that she had. So that's another thing to do, is just do. I mean, this book is not different than Cotton Malone, as you keep pointing out. It's not Cotton, but it's a lot
It's
like
different
Cotton.
characterization,
Right.
different historical
backstory,
element, different all
Right.
that. But it's action, history, secrets, conspiracy.
But if you decided to write like in the Doom,
I would love.
or-
I'll be honest with you. I've written 15,000 words of a sci-fi novel that I'd love to finish one day.
Yeah.
But it's time to sit down and write it. I'd love to write outside the genre. I have a suspense thriller that I would love for Grand Central to publish that I wrote. It's more like a Grisham novel
Right.
in that vein. and I wrote it many years ago, and I really like it. I mean, it's a good story. So, but unfortunately, you get kind of pigeonholed, and you know they don't want to move out of that where you are.
Unless you turn into Dan Brown, and all these lovely people are going to help the omega factor and have helped become so successful.
If I can challenge the king, now that's another story. But until you can challenge the king, you can't really do that. You can do whatever you want as long as it's in addition to what you're doing. You can't do it in lieu of what you're doing. And the problem with me is I can't. It's a problem. These books take a year.
Right.
I use 400 sources, three to 400 sources when I'm writing these books, and they just take so much time that I can't sit down and put it aside to write something completely outside the genre. So that's why there's 15,000 words of that book that stopped. That stopped. So maybe one day I'll get to branch out and do a little bit of that. It would be fun.
Yeah, it would be.
It would be
Anybody
fun.
have a final couple of questions?
Question is based on, I listened earlier today to your podcast with the author of Women in the Library,
Right.
and you started talking about editors. So
Right.
question, even you, but particularly for Steve and Diana, do you add an editor that you listen to or not listen to, and the outcome of listening or not, ignoring them, their suggestion or their, you were, Barbara saying that you had regretted telling an author something as an editor, that you would regret doing that.
It was actually not an author that I edited. It was an author that came to visit, which is why I've never really forgiven myself for deciding to edit his book. It was too late.
You discussed about authors ignoring or taking to heart what an editor has told them. I was wondering if either of you would have.
Well, it kind of depends on the editor. I have had one strikingly British editor and so forth with whom I had a serious difference of opinion, and I absolutely declined to do what she was telling me. And as it came down to a battle of wills, she was saying, "Oh, you'll publish the book, if you refuse to do all of this stuff." And she actually went so far as to have a sub-editor take the book, which had already been published in the U.S., adding to my resistance, and whack out the pieces she didn't like, and so forth, and edit it in ballpoint and send it to me for approval. So anyway, I was extremely upset about this. And my husband, who was very wise, said, "How much are they paying you for this book?" And I said, £20,000. He said, "Is it worth £20,000 to be unhappy every time you look at that book for the rest of your life?" So I sat down and wrote a 4-page letter of invective, ending with "on your bike," and which is, well, that means fuck off, basically. So anyway, I declined entirely to fall in with her.
There it is again.
Anyway, they did, after a certain amount of grumping, come back and say, "Well, all right, we'll publish it the way you wrote it, but we're only publishing it as a paperback, not as a hardcover, and we won't pay you £20,000. We'll only pay you $8. And furthermore, we're publishing it with a money-back guarantee sticker in case anyone who buys it thinking it's a romance and is angry at being fooled." So,
That's awesome.
Wow.
Fine. So anyway, they did, and here we all still are, being published by the same company, but not with her.
Patrick has pointed out to me we have some online
I
questions.
do.
You need
Yeah.
to come out here, though.
Can you hear me through the mic?
Yeah, but it's weird. So.
It is weird. All right.
Disembodied voice, yeah.
Hey, everybody.
What now?
Let's.
Well,
Not yet. Just talk. More talk.
Jean would like to know: has Steve ever considered writing a novel based in the Highlands, just taking a real event, Gabaldon ? And then asking, "What if?" Not the big "what if the Jacobites won," but some other "what if."
Well, that would be a historical fiction, which I would love to write one day. Don't get me wrong; it'd be great to write. Michener loved him. Sharon K. Penn loved her. But I would like to do a Cotton Malone book, or even a Nick book set in Scotland. I actually have an idea for something from Scottish history that may still be have life today, and I just haven't fleshed it out, and I need to go back. I've only been there once. I need to go back and see some more. So you might see Cotton or Nick head into Scotland. Yeah.
another question?
Yeah, Stefania, who's been tuning in from Italy. There's a little bit of a language thing, but I'm going to add a couple of questions together. This is for Diana. She says, "I believe that Ms. Gabaldon's saga has become iconic and will remain in the collective imagination." Nice comment. She has created a new world to take refuge in. This is a true masterpiece. Very nice.
That's very nice.
Her question is, do you ever feel overwhelmed by your success?
Oh, let's see. Well, not by the books, by all the stuff that happens around the books. Yes,
Sure.
frequently. No, there's just an enormous amount of what you might call PR that happens, especially when a new book is out. I mean, you guys saw what happened when Boat and Bees came out. Well, now it is beginning to happen again in all of the foreign countries because they're just now publishing it. Consequently, you know, I have been having to add on a trip to Spain and reluctantly declined to go to Poland just because of the political situation. I would love to go to Poland, but not right now, and you know, things like that. So, and if you say yes, I'll go, then instantly there's thousands of details that have to be done, and people say to me, well, don't you have an assistant to handle that sort of thing? I say, I have an assistant. My assistant would say, oh, so what's up? And I'll say, well, I have to go here, you know, to do this. And she would then talk to those people. She'd come back with a list of questions and say, so they want to know, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do I want to do that? I sit there and answer it. She goes back and she says, well, here's a list of flights. Which one would you like to take? And we discuss that. And it would be much faster to do it all myself.
Yeah, yeah. How do you stay grounded?
I have a husband.
Who likes to work on cars?
He does.
Yeah. Just a brief one here is about time travel. It says you're both lovers of history, obviously. If you could time travel back to any particular era, what would it be?
I like to say about 3500 BC. I would like to see what the invention of writing actually did to society.
That's very interesting.
Top that, Steve.
That's pretty good. She had that answer ready, boy. So she's been asked that before.
I've been asked that
She's been asked it before. Anytime that comes that quick, I know that you've had that before. That's a good question. I don't know where I'd go back. I used to say the Middle Ages. I was fascinated by the Middle Ages, so that might be it. But the Renaissance is fascinating too, and everything changed and modified. So it's interesting. Both of those eras are interesting to me. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't. I don't. He just said we're just going to go back and look around. We're not going to. I wouldn't want to live there. You cut your finger and you die because you have no antibiotics, no nothing. So I wouldn't want to live there. No. But as far as watching the evolution of civilization and how it, that would be kind of interesting to watch it as it transformed itself. Yeah.
And then you can't interact with it, or you change the course.
No, just watch it. Just watch it. But it would be fascinating to watch it as it changes.
Right. So do we have a final question before we all can't sit in these chairs any longer?
Lady in the front row.
Right here.
So, in reading your book, yours, how do you navigate through? There's so much. I saw your book pop up on a list of things that have been canceled. Where you can have culture and all of these navigational. How do you work through what your characters need to go through and what's happening in the course of the story without running into these landmines that have become so huge in our current society?
I ignore them.
I do too. I don't really deal.
I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to adjust your 18th century historical fiction to fit wokeness?
Yeah. I don't either.
No.
I don't worry about it. And I don't go pick a fight, just go, create an issue to deal with. But I just deal with the story. If it's part of the story, then it's part of the story. We just go forward with it. But you don't. I don't really sit around and think about it, really, to be honest with you.
It's a question that comes up for us too. Should we decide not to carry book X or book Y because somebody might, create a Twitter mob and come get us? I mean, this is Gay Pride Month, and we're going to highlight gay pride books, and I don't really care what they think about it in Florida or Texas, or other places.
I'm just thinking about books. You don't have to read it. You don't have to read it. You just
Right.
And I don't write. And you don't either. We don't write books for everybody.
No.
They're not for everybody. I mean, and I get those all the time. They write the emails and tell me how this and that. And you want to write, she won't let me. I mean, I want to write back and say, don't read it. Just throw it away. Go burn it. Yeah, right. No, she won't let me. She won't let me
Good
do
girl,
that.
isn't it?
She will not.
That's our rule here. Do not engage.
You just want to so bad, don't we?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, here, I will give you free use of my form letter number 13. Yeah.
She won't let me. She won't let me
So
respond.
I use this one, yeah. Yeah,
I've said on Amazon, you know, the reviews on there should be an author review button.
Yeah.
It's only for us.
Yeah.
We're the only ones that
Can read
can
it.
actually review, come back and
Yeah.
actually, you know, and I don't mind someone's opinion if their opinion is great. What I mind is people giving an opinion that did not read the book.
That'll
And
happen,
you
yeah.
and I can tell you didn't read the book. I can
Yeah.
I can
Or the
absolutely
quarrel is they didn't like the price or the shipping.
yeah,
was
yeah,
bad
something
or,
like that. You know,
other stuff.
everyone's entitled to their opinion,
No,
but you
totally
know,
don't read your reviews. I mean, don't ever do that. But,
Right.
I
but
do.
you know,
Why do
if they
you read
write
them?
to you, then Form Letter 13, which says, "Dear Sir or Madam, not all books are for all readers. I hope you enjoy whatever you read next. Yours truly."
That's true.
That's
good.
really well put, Dee.
Because that's exactly
Can I
right.
have it too?
Yes, you can.
Okay. I really like that. Well, I want to thank everybody for your patience. We've kind of run long, but then Diana's here, so we can't be too surprised that it's run over. It's been wonderful to see Steve in the flesh again,
It is.
because we've done a
Thank
couple of Zooms, and this is the first time we've done something with you for, gosh,
Wow.
a long time. Yeah, so thank you very much for coming out and making it so special this evening. What we're going to do is we're going to, and I want to thank all of you who are watching it online and say goodnight. Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.